Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of my podcast, Is Breakfast Included? How you guys doing? Good? Good. Welcome to episode 1 of season 2. Pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool. I never thought we'd make it past week 4 of season 1, but here we are, episode 53. Well, all right. Today on the show, I sit down with Jeff Liles. Now, Jeff is the talent buyer and kind of runs the show here at the Kessler Theater in Oak Cliff, Texas. If you've never been to the Kessler Theater, you're missing out. It's a great venue, great sound, and they've put on some great shows, but that's not what we were talking about. Well, we talked about it a little bit. Jeff has been around for years. He's been an artist, a manager. He was responsible for getting Rigor Mortis their record deal. He was DJ who got fired for playing Eazy-E's Boys in the Hood. We talked about that a little bit. He's done it all, and he's done it at the top level. Everyone I talked to always had the best things to say about Jeff, but he always made me nervous when I was around him. I really didn't know him, but I'd been in his presence a couple of times. He kind of made me nervous. I was nervous going in, and I had nothing to be nervous about. He was extremely pleasant. He answered all my questions. At one point, he had to run back to the Kessler to take care of some issues with his show, which was right across the street. And he asked me to wait at his place, like alone. He didn't know me, you know. Anyway, he got back and we finished the interview like a champ. I think anyone else would have called it off, but he didn't. It was a great conversation and I hope you enjoy it. Let's check it out. Yeah, I'm just going to let him talk.
Okay.
Anyway, tell everyone who you are.
My name is Jeffrey Liles. I'm the artistic director at the Kessler Theater in Dallas.
I know, man. I appreciate you doing this. Right off the bat, like you've been called the de facto dean, music historian of the Dallas music scene.
Who called me that?
Pretty much everybody I talk to.
I have to talk to them about that.
Right. Where are you from, man, originally?
I was born in Dallas at Baylor Hospital, right outside of Deep Ellum.
Right on. And brothers, sisters?
One sister, Laura.
And she in the music business too, or?
No, she's a human being. She's an accountant, I think.
I refer to us as carnies. She
actually finished school.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you know what? Before we get any further, I heard the story about you being on Oprah about teenagers that were successful parents or something like that.
Yeah. My dad was a vice president of 7-Eleven when I was a kid. And for a while, he lived up in Chicago, which is where they filmed the Oprah show. And every week, at the beginning of the week, on one of the local radio stations there, they would announce what the upcoming topics were for tapings about 2 or 3 weeks later. And at the time, I think as a joke, my dad called him up and said, yeah, we should get my son on there. And anyway, I didn't ever think that it would actually happen, but it did. And they put me on an airplane and flew me up to Chicago first class and put me up at the Hotel Nico downtown, beautiful Japanese hotel. And it was pretty interesting. It was fun. Oprah's really nice. She's a sweetheart.
Right on, right on. I think I just looked down at it's children who disappoint their successful parents, what the episode was called or something.
Yeah. And I mean, like any other talk show, basically each episode on a talk show exists to promote somebody's product.
Yeah.
And there was an author who had a book out. I can't remember what his name was, but he had this book out about, the relationship dynamic between parents and kids who, go astray or whatever. And basically it was me and my father and this other kid and his father and this author. And we were all sitting there on stage, and the other kid was a little bit younger than I was, and he was he had a little bit of stage fright or something. He was definitely kind of withdrawn. He was kind of an introvert. And Oprah asked him a question, real simple, just how are you doing? Basically just a nice question, and he didn't respond. And he was just kind of sitting there, not saying anything. And then this author who was there promoting his book, said, see, now this is why you can't blah, blah, blah with your parents. You've got to learn to talk to them or whatever. And I looked at the kid and I said, don't listen to anything he's saying. He's just trying to sell a book. And the guy like went after me after the show. He was like, how dare you, blah, 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 or whatever. And my dad was, he was pretty humorous about it. He was like, yeah, my son's kind of outspoken.
So, like your dad called in, so it's pretty much a thing that he set up for you. And then I think
he did it as a joke.
Yeah,
actually, I don't think he seriously thought we would end up on the Oprah show.
Do you have a pretty good relationship with your parents?
Yeah, totally. My dad's a retired minister now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, there have been so many music scenes in Dallas, and you've been part of most of them. When did you get in? Like, what? You were kind of part of the whole theater gallery crowd, but what drew you to the music scene?
Honestly, I had moved down to Austin around 1980, right after I got out of high school, and there was a great punk rock scene, a great alternative music scene happening down there. And it was really inspiring, being down there and just kind of seeing that and seeing how everybody my age in the community was involved in it. It was, it was just really inspiring. Anyway, I came back up to Dallas. Family still lives here. And I was just visiting just for the weekend or something. And I saw a flyer in a music store that said a band needed a bass player. And back then, there just weren't a whole lot of bass players in Dallas. They just weren't. Everybody wanted to play guitar, and that was it, including myself included. I'd been playing guitar for 5 or 6 years by that time. And anyway, I kind of thought to myself, yeah, it'd be funny to try out, just to see if I could, make it. Maybe I'll borrow somebody's bass and try out. And I mentioned that to Bill at Bill's Records, that I was going to borrow somebody's bass and try out for this band. He said, let me buy you one. I said, you don't have to do that. And he's like, no, I want to. And he bought me a blonde Fender Maple Precision bass. It was just beautiful instrument, And I went and I tried out for this band. All the guys in the band were probably about 10 or 15 years older than I was. They were in a punk rock band that used to play at the Hot Club all the time called The Do. And this was their new band called Group 6. And, of course, they couldn't find a bass player. And they, allowed me to join their band. And they were all guys who were married and had day jobs and stuff. So the band was kind of like something they were doing outside of their normal routine. And I was doing it full time. I was like, I couldn't believe I was in a band, And
did you play bass before that?
No, but I play guitar,
okay.
And I figured it's the same notes. It's the same top 4 strings, you just don't play chords. You just play single notes,
Okay.
I played with a pick, So anyway, nobody else in the band would go out and hustle us any gigs. And I really wanted to play out. We had recorded this little 4-track demo that got played on the Rock and Roll Alternative. So I was really excited. I was going to make the band happen somehow, And I was just wandering around down in Deep Ellum, and I happened into this art gallery space called Theater Gallery. And I met Russell Hobbs, who is the guy who owns it. And I noticed that he was letting bands play at his art gallery openings. So I asked him, hey, can our band play one of your art gallery openings? And he said, yeah, sure. He didn't even listen to our demo or anything. He said, yeah, go for it. So I was so stoked. I couldn't wait to get back and tell the other guys in the band, I had scored us a gig, And I went to band practice that night and told them, hey, man, I got us a gig at this little place called Theater Gallery. It's an art gallery in Deep Ellum. They said, well, we got bad news. I was like, what's up? He goes, we're breaking up the band. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me. So I figured, how am I going to go back to this guy and tell him my band just broke up? I was humiliated, And I walked back in the front door and I told Russell, I said, man, I'm sorry. My band broke up. We can't do this art gallery opening thing. He said, why don't you stay here and help me book bands and just find bands to play here more often? And I had never done that kind of thing before, but I figured, how hard can it be? And I went and bought a notebook and a pen, and I started hanging out at other people's shows and getting their phone numbers and, just basically networking. This was before there was an internet, before there was email. You had to literally go to the show and meet the band and get their phone number and call them and go through that whole deal. And after a while, I figured out how to do it, and I was pretty good at it. There weren't really that many people doing that either. Like, there weren't that many bass players,
Yeah.
So like anything in life, it's just a person goes out and finds a niche and fills it, and that's basically what I did.
You started out as a bass player, moved into the booking side of it.
I was a bass player for about a month. I mean, I played guitar for 5 years, but I mean, I wasn't like gifted musically. I'm not like, I understand basic music theory, and I can communicate with other musicians, and but I don't have like the natural chops that a lot of people have, and I'm not like a 10,000 hour guy. I don't sit there and woodshed all day, so I was never going to be a musician on that level. It just wasn't going to happen. But one thing I am good at is just hooking people up, putting people together in situations.
A connector.
Basically, I mean, that's, a conduit between artists and venues.
Well, I've been playing guitar since I was 14. I'm still not a 10,000 hour guy.
Yeah.
I'm that
you
guy.
can tell when someone is.
Yeah.
You can just tell they just attack the instrument, and there's just very little mistakes or, or whatever. They just, they kind of plug into something that's otherworldly, it's just talent,
Dallas is filled with great musicians, promoters, talent buyers, but you've done it all. You were a musician, a booking agent, talent buyer, a manager,
radio DJ. I was on KNON for a while too.
That's right. You got fired.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. I mean, that's anyone you ask about Jeff Liles and Dallas, they have a different story of you.
I'm old, yeah. It comes from being around for a while.
This one always comes up, man. This story of was it your band Decadent Dub Team?
Well, Decadent Dub Team happened. It was kind of an extension of the radio show. The radio show was called Life is Hard. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was really infatuated with this new emerging music, hip-hop music. I was also infatuated with speed metal. I was managing Rigor Mortis at the time. Yeah. And Def Jam Records, which was still a brand new record label then, was kind of doing the unthinkable. They were putting out rap records and they were putting out Slayer's records.
Yeah.
So it was like, it was kind of the two genres that I was really into, and that's kind of what the radio show became. It was a lot of the first emerging kind of I hate to say techno, but kind of trip hop stuff that was coming out, like Tackhead and Fats Comet and Adrian Sherwood, the stuff that he was mixing, Ministry's Twitch records, stuff like that. I was really infatuated with that. And there was another guy, or two other guys, I should say, here in town, Paul Quigg and David Williams. Paul was here from Dallas and was a member of the Nerve Breakers punk rock band. And David was from Denton. And they were the two first guys in town who had sampling keyboards and also had drum machines and had a lot of the electronic gear that was still brand new on the market. And the three of us got together and started a band of dub music, essentially just noise and dub. And we didn't really have like a front man. We didn't really have, a stage show that was, like a rock and roll band or whatever. It was three guys, jacking around on electronics. They played the samplers and drum machines, and I played a turntable. I was a DJ, and I literally had this little Sears turntable. It was a little $25 turntable, and I taped a quarter onto the needle on the tone arm to keep the groove and the needle in the groove.
Yeah.
And that's what I cut Six Gun on, was a $25 turntable, a little piece of junk that actually had a speaker in the top of it. We had to put a microphone on the speaker, so and it was really, really primitive. But, my job in the band was basically to find sound bites and stuff that we could sample and loop or parts of speeches, all kinds of stuff from TV, and we just kind of became this mixed media, I guess it's a band. I mean, it was kind of a band. It was, we were like an art project almost,
And I think it was Island Records took an interest to you guys, correct?
Yeah. There was an A&R person for Island Records named Kim Bowie, and Kim came to Dallas one weekend, and when we were doing Theater Gallery and Profit Bar, and we showed her around town, took her to see the New Bohemians, took her to see the Buck Pets, took her to see Loco Gringos and all the bands that were playing down in Deep Ellum. And she fell in love with the neighborhood, and she was like motivated to want to do a compilation record called The Sound of Deep Ellum. And all the different styles of music that were happening down there were represented except for what we were doing. And so we played her our stuff and she liked it. And that was literally the first song that we ever recorded in the studio was Six Gun.
Yeah.
And she liked it and ended up getting on there. That became the single from the record, from the Sound of Deep Ellum record. And at the same time, Kim had discovered this rap group in Compton, California, performing at a roller rink in Compton, California. And they were called NWA.
Yeah.
And she was really trying to sign them to Island as well. And so she was always taking meetings with them. And David Williams and I would go out to California. We'd drive out there literally and hang out with NWA and you know, Dre would mix our stuff. He mixed our song for the Color soundtrack. He did it for $500. It was his first remix. And we were both kind of in the same place. Our bands were both just kind of starting out. And we had this small label, small major. Island was kind of a small major label at the time. Kim was interested in both of us. So, you know, she was kind of, in the way that A&R people do this, she was just kind of courting both bands at the same time. So a lot of times we'd end up going out to eat with them, or, you know, we'd go out there to do demos, and Dre would bring a turntable over and lend us gear and stuff, you know. And then they ended up doing a deal with Priority, and going in a different direction. And he and I lost touch for years after that. But yeah, that's how that happened. It all basically boils down to Kim Bowie.
Uh-huh.
Kim also signed the Buck Pets to Island.
Cool.
Based on that record. That was the first song that Reverend Horton Heat ever put out. That was the first song that Edie Brickell and New Bohemians ever put out.
Was on this compilation.
Was on the Sound of Deep Ellum, yeah. Getting some stuff together. And one day I was out on the beach in Venice, kind of just hanging out there on the boardwalk where, you know, homeless people hang out. And this woman came walking up to me and she said, "Jeff, is that you?" And I looked at it, and it was Teresa Ensinet. And Teresa was the A&R person at Geffen who signed Edie Brickell and New Bohemians. She and Kim Bowie were best friends at the time.
Okay.
And at the time, Teresa had left Geffen, and she was at A&M Records. A&M had Soundgarden, and you know it was a formidable label at the time. And anyway, she's like, "Jeff, what are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm just hanging out here." And she's like, "Well, look, I work at A&M now. You know, if you want to like go in the studio and do a demo or something, you know, let me know. I'll put you in the studio." And the first thing that popped into my head was, yeah, a place to stay. You know, I figured I would just stay in there and sleep in there, you know, for the next few days. I didn't have any songs. I didn't have any gear. I didn't have any ideas. I didn't know what I was going to do. But I told her, yeah, I'd do it. And the A&M lot's right there in the middle of Hollywood. And they have a beautiful recording studio in there, huge recording studio. So I went in there the first day. I had a friend of mine that lived in Los Angeles named Mickey Petralia, who was a DJ. And now, since then, he's become a producer. He produced Beck stuff, and he's worked on a lot of cool stuff. Anyway, he was the only person I knew in California that had a sampler. So I called Mick up and I said, "Hey man, I'm booked into the studio tomorrow at A&M, and I need someone to help me do some loops and do some beats." I was going to do like another instrumental thing, like the DDT record. And Mick was like, "Well, I don't know if I can make it tomorrow, but maybe the next day." And I was like, "Okay, please just get there as soon as you can." So the first day I went in, I didn't have any gear. I didn't have any songs. I didn't have any ideas. And the engineer's just kind of sitting there twiddling his thumbs, looking at me and going, "What are you going to do, dude?" And I said, "Well, I have this notebook that's filled with these little kind of just short story things. Do you mind if I read them onto tape just so I have in case I ever lose this notebook?" And he goes, "Dude, it's your time. Do whatever you want to do." So we spent the rest of that day recording that whole notebook. Mm-hmm. And literally, I mean, that was back when we were working with analog tape, big 2-inch tapes, you know, they're 15 minutes long. They held, you know, we went through 5 of those tapes, filling them up with stuff from my notebook, you know. And the next day, Mickey shows up. Okay, so we thought we're just, you know, I didn't even tell him I had recorded all these vocal stuff. I just, you know, we were going to make an instrumental deal. That's what we were going to do. So we started doing some beats and, you know, and we're striping them on the same part of the tape, same place on the tape where I had recorded the vocals, but the vocals were all muted. He didn't even know until the end of the day that I had put vocals on the same tape. So at the end of the day, after we had recorded about, I don't know, a dozen or so different musical sequences that we were going to try and develop into something, the engineer pressed the unmute button on the vocals. And the vocals came out over the beats where they were. And we're like looking at Mickey's like, what is that? And I'm like, oh, that's some stuff I recorded yesterday. No, never mind. And he goes, no, man, it sounds good. And I was like, well, yeah, that is kind of weird. It does work, doesn't it? You know, and we went through the tape and 12 of them worked perfectly. Pure accident. I mean, they were on the same part of the tape with no, you know, strategic, you know, oh, we should put this beat to that music. Those were the beats that were on the tape on the same spot. And they just worked.
Right on.
And so at the end of the day, at the end of the second day, I should say, you know, we started putting these tapes together and dumping them on the cassette. And on the third day, Teresa came in just to check on us to see what we were coming up with. And she heard this tape, you know, that literally we had, you know, an album's worth of material that we had come up with in 2 days by accident. And she's like, this is great. Let me take this to the A&R staff here. And she took it to the A&M people, and they decided they liked it. They weren't going to throw a bunch of money at it, you know, like they would a big major label artist or whatever, but they wanted to put it out. And we dicked around for like a month or two talking about, you know, whether we're going to be on A&M or not. And finally, they just, you know, said, no, we're not going to do it. So I had this album's worth of material, and the people who heard it liked it. They had an immediate response to it. So I was like, how can I shop this around? I don't own these tapes. A&M owns them, you know. And I got a tape into the hands of somebody else who put it in the hands of someone at Virgin Records. And Virgin said, hey, we really want to sign this, you know. And so I was like, all right, how am I going to get my masters? And this is at a time where I didn't even have a car. I didn't have a driver's license. I didn't have a car. I was couch surfing in Venice, California. So I went and got on the city bus and rode the city bus and from Venice to Hollywood and went to the room, the giant vault that they have at A&M that has all the tapes that everybody's ever done, you know. And I said, hey, I need to check my tapes out. We're going to do some remixes at another studio. To the guy who was working the midnight shift there, you know. And he's like, okay, yeah, no problem. So he gives me these tapes. I had 5 of them. They each weigh about 15 pounds a piece. They're huge. I got back on the bus and I took those 5 tapes back out to Venice. And I said, I got them. We're good. We're good to go. And I knew that A&M was never going to notice them gone because they weren't going to make a record out of my stuff. You know, I mean,
it's not like they were going to come back to it.
Yeah, they weren't going to go do inventory and all these demos gone. You know, it's not like that. That was never going to happen. So did the deal with Virgin, and we ended up doing some different music on it. Mickey, the guy that had done the beats, decided he wanted more money. So I put together a band of really killer hotshot musicians from Dallas, and we, you know.
Yeah. You need to get that?
It was at the front door.
Yeah, I think so.
Can you pause it?
Yeah, I can just later, and I'll just edit it out.
So little situation I got to take care of over here at the venue. Can you hang out here for like 15 minutes or so?
Yeah, totally, man. Totally. Okay. I can pause it. So cool. We were talking about Cottonmouth, Texas. You got the deal with Virgin?
Yeah. So I met these guys who had a video production company in Los Angeles called Underground Media. And it was called The Underground when I first met them. But they did a lot of really amazing music videos during that time period. They did Marilyn Manson's Sweet Dreams Are Made of This video. They had a stop frame animation artist named Fred Sturr who worked on Tool's Prison, Sex, and Sober videos. And Floria Sigismondi, who did videos for Bowie and for Nine Inch Nails and for Marilyn Manson. Anyway, they had heard my record. It was weird how copies of my cassette tape were like floating around Los Angeles and ending up in people's hands who had no idea how they got them, but they had heard it and they thought this is a great idea for a film, for a larger film project. So I met them and met with them and we hit it off, and I started kind of working in their shop there in the daytime as kind of a gopher, you know, running around doing stupid stuff while we were waiting for this deal to happen. And while I was finishing up kind of like a script version of the album, White Trash Receptacle record. and did that for a while. They were friends with Nancy Berry, who was the vice chairman of Virgin Records at the time. And Nancy really liked it, and she said, "Yeah, we'll sign this." And they put the record out. They put a new cover on it, and then re-released it internationally. And yeah, that's how that happened.
Right on. About how long were you out in L.A.?
On and off for like 12 years.
12 years.
Yeah.
And
I was like a professional couch surfer. I was house sitting for Mitch Marine, who was the drummer of Smash Mouth and Dwight Yoakam's band. He was originally from Denton. He was a drummer in Brave Combo back in the day.
I think he played bass for Jack Ingram for a while, too.
Yeah. He's produced records. He's done a bunch of different stuff. While he was on tour with Dwight, I would house sit for him in Toluca Lake. And also I was living with a woman named Jessica Clark, who was managing DJ Shadow and working with Cypress Hill and a bunch of bands like that. Jessica was actually, when she was living in Dallas, was the person who helped start Trees. When Trees first got going, basically I'd looked at this building. I was hanging out in Deep Ellum, in the late 80s, and I would walk over to Elm Street before there was anything going on Elm Street. Club Dada was literally the only club on Elm Street. And I looked at this empty building, and I just kept, like standing there looking through the window, imagining this could be an amazing live music venue. And Jessica got hired by this guy named Brian Davis to do the publicity for it. He had rented the building, and he was going to make it like a seafood place, like Aw Shucks or something.
Yeah.
And with picnic tables in there. He had just moved back from Louisiana where he's living, and he was rolling the kind of gumbo and that kind of stuff. And she's like, "Jeff, if we can just sit this guy down and talk to him, I think that we can talk him into doing a live music venue instead of his seafood place concept." So we met with him, and we did, and that's basically how Trees ended up starting.
I know.
Brian was the son of Colin Davis, the Fort Worth millionaire.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you guys got Trees started.
1990.
You were the booking guy there, right?
Yeah, first 3 years.
And you booked, I take it you booked the infamous Nirvana show there.
I booked it for the club. The show itself was actually purchased by 462.
Okay.
Mark Lee and Danny Eaton were just throwing shows my way. I had a deal with them when we were doing Theater Gallery where they would send shows our way, and I would give them $1 a head per ticket sold. And that's how we did the Replacement show and Jane's Addiction and Red Hot Chili Peppers and all the shows we did at Theater Gallery. So when I went to work at Trees, I had the same deal with them. Basically, they would send something my way, and I'd give them $1 a head for tickets sold.
Now, would they send shows your way that they didn't think could sell a bigger venue, or just?
Yeah, that's some of it, but part of it is they were in the business of putting on much bigger shows, really bigger shows, the Bronco Bowl and arenas and stuff like that. For them, the key thing was to have the agency know that they were in on the band's career trajectory at the very beginning.
Okay.
So rather than them renting a room somewhere and putting it on and taking all the risk or whatever, I did all that for them, and basically they didn't have any risk. They just got $1 a head per show. And as long as their agency thought that 462 did the show, that's all they really cared about.
Okay.
Because they wanted to make sure that the next time the band came through at a much bigger venue, that they would get the first shot at it.
Okay.
Which is how booking worked back then. That's just the way it is. The agencies develop long-term relationships with the buyers, and that's how great shows end up in certain places.
Yeah. Okay. Right on. That show in particular, it's legendary. Everybody I know was there. All 20,000 people were there.
There were actually more people outside the building that night than there were inside.
Yeah.
They were definitely too big to play there.
Yeah, I was managing a music store called Hastings at the time.
Yeah.
And the record label rep, would always put, we get on the guest list, and we showed up down there, and the line was around the block, and we were like, yeah, there's no way we're getting in this show. So we all know what happened at that show.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
You mentioned earlier, Bill from Bill's Records. You had a documentary called The Last Record Store, but was it a bunch of shorts that you did of that?
No, it was actually about an hour and 10 minutes long, and I really didn't make that for public release. I made that for Bill.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted him to have that. I wanted him to know, how the community felt about him.
Yeah.
I wanted him to have a keepsake. I wanted him to have, he was moving his store from the North Dallas location to
Lamar,
and so I wanted him to have, something to remember it by. And I didn't really try and get a distribution deal for the film. I didn't make any effort at all to try and get it released because I'm not a filmmaker. I mean, obviously you can tell by watching it that I'm not a filmmaker. But we did get into a festival in Los Angeles called Don't Knock the Rock Festival, which was a bunch of great little short music documentary. And it showed at the Disney Theater in downtown. And Bill flew out there for that. And just for him to get to see that in a theater in Los Angeles, that to me, that was the sum total of what needed to happen with it, what did happen with it. And a few years later, when YouTube became a thing or whatever, I started putting little 2-minute long chunks of it on YouTube.
Yeah. And that's all I've seen of it. Yeah. I've never seen the whole movie.
It's
very little
really
information online.
It's really, really hard to license music for a film like that.
Yeah.
We just didn't have a budget for that. I mean, we shot and edited it over 2 years and spent probably 15, 20 grand of our own money getting it made. But the licensing part of licensing songs by Elliott Smith and people like that would have been like $200,000 a pop.
We
didn't have a backer.
And like you said, you made it for him.
Yeah. I just wanted Bill to be able to see it,
Man, let's get up to date. You came back to Dallas 2008, 2009.
Actually, I came back for Carter Albrecht's funeral. Carter was a local musician who was universally beloved. Man, I don't even want to talk about how it happened, but I came back to Dallas for that. And while I was here, this guy had called me up. He had got my phone number from a writer at the Dallas Observer. His name is Edwin Cabanis, and he had purchased this building in Oak Cliff. He really wanted to make it like a cultural center, like a studio space, dance studio for his wife's kids, dance studio, and theater stuff. He wanted to make it an all-purpose thing. And he called me up 2 or 3 different times and asked me if I'd come by and look at it. And I was only going to be in town, for a couple of days. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make it by here or not. And finally, the 3rd time when he called me, I said, okay, I'll come look at it. So I came over and looked at the building, and it had been empty for 17 years. It was just shot to shit. I mean, basically, is the only way I can describe it. It literally, had gone to hell because nothing had happened there for almost 2 decades. And I was like, man, this is going to be a huge job. This is going to be a huge undertaking. I hope you understand that. And at the time, Oak Cliff was also a dry neighborhood. So the idea of doing a live music venue in a dry neighborhood, to me, my first impression was there's no way in the world it would work. And he's like, don't worry, I got that taken care of. I'll do it. I'll make it happen. And I was like, yeah, sure. Whatever. I was so skeptical. And my mom overheard me talking to him on the phone. And when I hung up, she's like, who was that? I said, well, this guy in Oak Cliff who bought this building who really wants me to come help him at least look at it and see how to do it or whatever. She's like, please stay here. Please don't go back to Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's the first time I'd heard her say that, And I could tell, it's because my family's getting older or whatever, and they need me around here. And so I said, okay, I'll give it some consideration. And I did. And I went back over here and talked to Edwin again. And Edwin said, look, I'll put you up in an apartment nearby. I want you to be my guy here on the ground to get this thing going. And I was working at the Roxy Theater in Los Angeles at the time, and I really loved working at the Roxy. I mean, every night was an adventure there. It was absolutely incredible.
I can imagine.
I mean, literally, there would be nights on the counter where it just said TBD. I had no idea who was playing that night when I was going into work, and I'd get there, and there'd be the Sex Pistols sound checking, or Black Crowes, or Red Hot Chili Peppers, or somebody who's way too big to play a 300-seat hall, And so I was loving living there and loving working there. It was a lot for me to set that aside and come back here and take this on. But I did it anyway. And literally it took us 17 months to get that building ready to open. And, again, we didn't have a liquor license at the time. I didn't know how we were going to do this. And he said, don't worry, I got that taken care of. And he had a referendum put on the ballot to make Oak Cliff a wet neighborhood, and it passed and won.
Wow.
And then the Kessler more or less became the tentpole attraction in the neighborhood. And restaurants started opening up around it. It just, it inspired a lot of growth and development in the neighborhood.
And you've been there
since then, 13 years now.
Huh. I know every time I've been there, I've done a couple of shows there, and I've been there to see shows. Your staff, and I'm not kissing your ass, like your staff is, everything about that venue is top notch,
Well, I got to be honest, we have a very different culture than most venues. A lot of venues, I hate to say this, I don't want to talk shit about any other venues specifically, but you go into another venue and the security there treats you less than human. They treat you get your ticket scanned at the door, you get treated like a barcode. They tell you can't stand here, you can't do that, you can't do this.
Can't go out and come back in.
It's so prohibitive. Yeah. Everything is so unnecessarily prohibitive. And I just wanted to have the exact opposite kind of culture than that. I don't want our employees walking around telling people, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. It's ridiculous. I hate to say this, but this is the truth. It's ridiculous to tell an audience that they can't take pictures at a show. Back in the day when there was only 3 or 4 people in the audience who had a camera, that was plausible. Okay. Yeah. That's one thing. But these days, every single person in the audience has a camera in their pocket.
Yeah.
How are you going to police that? Do you really want to be the place that's constantly on top of your customer saying, no, put your phone down. No, don't do that. In this day and age, I don't necessarily like it, but people want to document everything they do.
Yeah.
They just do. And there's nothing you can do about that. We're not going to change society. We're not going to change the way people are. We don't have to agree with it. We don't have to like it, but we're not going to stand there and tell you, you can't look at your phone. It's just, it's just impossible. How are you going to know whether or not maybe they have an emergency at home and someone's texting them, your kid's sick or something like that? You're going to walk up and tell them, hey, put your phone down. You just can't do that.
Yeah.
And you know what? The bands, they people don't really say it or whatever, but the bands need publicity.
Yeah.
If someone's taking your photo and putting it on their MySpace page or their Facebook page or their Instagram or whatever, they need that to help them draw attention to their new record.
Yeah.
They need it. I mean, the old days of media are over. Nobody reads the Dallas Morning News.
Yeah.
They're not looking to the Dallas Observer for, tips on music or whatever. They're looking at each other's social media posts.
Yeah. It's all about.
And artists need exposure any way they can get it.
Yeah.
Even if it is a crappy photo, or whatever, it's still, if the people are there having
video.
a good time, that's what matters, that they had a good time.
Yeah.
And if we can deliver a once in a lifetime experience, seeing an artist that they really love and the artist totally crushes it, I don't care if they shoot a shitty video of it.
Yeah.
Let them remember it.
Yeah. There was a time when you would record about 3 or 4 songs of the set and put them up on the YouTube page. Are you still doing that?
I don't do it as much anymore. Yeah. I still try to when I can, but honestly, I don't have that much time to sit here and do post-production stuff.
Yeah.
I just don't have time. I mean, in the beginning, when we were trying to create a profile for the venue and try and show people the diversity of the type of music that we're having, it made good sense.
Yeah.
To try and put up as much as I can. But with as busy as we are now and other stuff going on in the world, like the pandemic and all that or whatever, I don't have the bandwidth personally to sit there and do post-production work all night after a show. Yeah. I can do 1 or 2 songs, something like that.
Well, man, it seems like you, like I said earlier, you've been part of pretty much every music scene that's come through Dallas since maybe the late 70s, early 80s. Was there a favorite time for you?
It's hard to look at it in terms of what was my favorite, because each era, each time period, is special for its own reason.
Mm-hmm.
With Theater Gallery and Profit Bar, that was like the Wild West. I mean, back then, the Theater Gallery was the only building in Deep Ellum that had neon on their sign. I mean, we literally were the first people to really hold Deep Ellum up in a historical light. There were other venues that were there before that. Studio D was down there before that. And of course, Adair's was down there. But we were the first ones to try and reclaim the history from the Depression era. Mm-hmm. When recognize the musical center of gravity that happened during that time period and kind of reclaim that. If you look at the history of Dallas music, the center of gravity around town has shifted from place to place to place over the years. When I first started getting into music, all the copy band clubs like the Bijou and Cardi's and all that stuff, that was on Agora. That's when the center of gravity was on Northwest Highway. Mm-hmm. Then a couple of years later, it was on Lower Greenville Avenue with Arcadia Theater and with Port David's Pub, on the air and DJs and all those clubs on Lower Greenville. That's when the center of gravity was there. And then it shifted to Deep Ellum when Theater Gallery happened and Club Clearview happened and the other venues at Profit Bar and kind of Club Dada. When all that happened, then it shifted to Deep Ellum. And then for a while it was in Oak Cliff when the Bronco Bowl was like the best venue in town. So kind of in this day and age now, I think the center of gravity is kind of between Oak Cliff, where the Kessler is happening, and Revelers Hall and all that, Bishop Arts District, and then Deep Ellum, which still has the Bomb Factory and Trees and Club Donna.
Yeah.
That's kind of how that's happened. And the different eras, Theater Gallery was fun because every weekend was different, and we were scraping by to get money for a keg to have beer every weekend.
Right.
And Trees was different because that was right when alternative rock was just grunge music and stuff were all starting to happen. And that was lightning in a bottle. We happened to catch Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Radiohead, and all these bands their first time through Dallas. Yeah. We happened to be able to put their shows on. And then, where was it? Dada, working at Dada was interesting. Working at Longhorn Ballroom was interesting. Longhorn, of course, had the same kind of history, the past history that the Bronco Bowl had.
Yeah.
Before I went to work there were all those great country artists, plus the punk rock artists like the Sex Pistols and Ramones and Patti Smith. They had all played there. And that was fun to kind of reclaim some of that there. And then, then the Kessler.
All right, on, man. Well, I know you're busy, man. I'm going to wrap this up real quick. Everyone I've ever met, like I said, you and I have met in passing a couple of times, but anyone I ask about, before I called you, before I started hassling you to do this interview, I was asking people like, what's he like? And no one had a bad thing to say about you. Everyone said, just ask him. He'll do it. And I think I approached you at the door one night and you wrote your name, your email on a napkin, and then I ended up throwing it away on accident. But, man, when all this is gone, man, how do you want to be remembered?
Wow.
Because you never chased anything. Everything's just kind of,
no, that's true.
The universe kind of put it in your way and you made the most of it. And a lot of people will define success as like, I got a record deal and I made $1 million and sold platinum albums. You've had the record deal. You've been the band manager. You've done everything, but you didn't chase anything. And I think just in meeting you, you feel like that's success to you. You've kind of,
here's one of the things.
Live the dirtbag's dream.
Yeah. Here's one of the things about living in Los Angeles, okay? You have immediate proximity to people who are incredibly successful in the business. Uh-huh. And one of the things that you immediately see is they lose some of their humanity when that happens. They lose their trust in other people. They lose their core. They lose their center of gravity. They lose their composure. Not all of them, but a lot of them do. And a lot of them are relentlessly unhappy. It's weird. I mean, I look at Kanye West and what he's going through right now.
Yeah.
That guy is immensely popular, but he's obviously one of the most unhappy human beings you've ever seen in your life. And from what I've seen, the more popular you get, the bigger you get, the less privacy you have, the less solitude you have, the less one-to-one communication with other people about regular everyday shit you have. And that, losing that, I don't think I would ever be able to deal with myself. If I'd gotten to that point where I knew the minute I walked out of a room, people went, "Oh my God, what an asshole."
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not saying that you automatically become an asshole when you get popular, but you do start thinking about 20 things at once.
Yeah.
Which makes it real hard for you to give your undivided attention to other people about simple everyday things like, how's your cat doing?
No.
Or anything like that. I mean, it's like, I don't want to lose that humanity. I don't want to lose the everyday, just being grounded, I don't want to lose the thing that makes people special, the thing that matters,
Right.
I don't want to go crazy,
Yeah.
and I see a lot of those people going crazy.
Yeah.
And I when I was younger, when I was like, 23, 24 years old, and I already had a gold record and all that stuff, I started slipping into that mindset. And thankfully the world brought me back down to earth.
Yeah.
It wasn't long after that I was living on the beach in Venice.
Yeah. What would you tell that cat right now?
What do you mean?
What would you tell that 20-year-old Jeff?
Well, I'm not disappointed how it turned out. Everything happens for a reason.
I agree.
It's like, you're met with different challenges. You're met with different, opportunities in life or whatever that challenge your sensibilities and challenge your values, and the thing that you got to do at any age is just figure out what your values are, and just stand by them.
Right on, man.
It's not really that difficult. Just be a decent human being. It's really not. And you'll find if you stay grounded and if you do stay down to earth and you do remain a normal person with feelings and normal situations in your life,
empathetic.
Yeah. It's so important. Empathy is so fucking important. It really is. There's not enough of it in the world.
No.
Well, now that social media has exploded, everything is about me.
Mm-hmm.
How I'm seeing the lens that I'm seeing the world through. And that's, that's okay for you, but do you need to make that public?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a no-brainer. That's just, just the way it is.
Right on, man. Well, I'll lighten it up. My podcast is called Is Breakfast Included? And if it was included, what would you have?
Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and hash browns.
Right on.
I'm pretty normal. I don't need nothing. I don't need brunch. I don't really do brunch, I usually sleep way past when brunch happens. But my girlfriend does make amazing breakfast, and that's my favorite meal of the day.
Well, right on, man. Well, I appreciate your time, dude. I know you're busy, and thank you for doing this. It's a pleasure getting to know you.
Sure.
I wish I would have come and done this a while back. I'm on my way out of Texas. That's why I say that.
Where are you heading?
Headed to New Jersey.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, but anyway, thanks for your time, man.
Sure, of course.
Right on, everyone. Jeff Liles of the Kessler Theater. You can find out more information about the Kessler Theater at thekessler.org. Visit the website. Check out what shows they have coming. You won't be disappointed. It's a great venue, and the staff is amazing. Well, all right, guys. I am done. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you next week.